All right. Good evening. We are the late edition of the Daf Yomi this week. We're starting at later hour, but if you are at home, you're doing it on your own leisurely schedule, but you missed a great flan yesterday. So we are
Still talking about
Daf Samach Amid Aleph. We've got some sponsors. We got a sponsor today. We're sponsored by Ryan and Talia Bernkopf. Le'ilu Nishmas, Tali's father, Banish Ben Eliyahu, whose Yortzai was on the 28th of Mar Cheshvan. May his neshama have an aliyah.
Amen.
We are in the middle of, we're actually almost towards the very end of a nice little machlokes that we were having, which is a good place to get started with Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi about the size of the Mizbeach that was in the times of the Mishkan. Apparently, Rabbi Yehuda suggests that the Mizbeach in the Mishkan was 10 amos by 10 amos on the top of it and 3 amos tall. And Rabbi Yossi holds that the Mizbeach was 10 amos tall, and it was 5 amos by 5 amos on the top, right? Mm-hmm. So now the question is, b'mai pligi, what is really the big essence of their debate? Mar savar donen chutz michutz ve'in donen chutz mipnim. They had a gzera shava that each of them were learning. They were comparing the word ravua, which was written by the Mizbeach that was in the Mishkan, and they were deciding what was the appropriate thing to compare it to. If you compare Ravua to the outer Mizbeach of the third Beis Hamikdash, that's written in Yechezkel. So then, when we talk about the size of the Mizbeach in the Mishkan, it says it's 5 amos, but Ravua means that we were measuring from the middle. And so therefore 5 amos is just the radius, not the diameter, although that's circular, so I don't know if we can call radius of a square. But essentially the concept is there, right? It's double the measurement in order to get the full distance across. That's one way of looking at it. It's better to compare an outer Mizbeach to an outer Mizbeach rather than to compare the dimensions of the outer Mizbeach to the inner Mizbeach. Umar Savar, whereas Rabbi Yossi says, Donen kli mi kli, vein donen kli mi binyan. It's better to compare utensils to utensils. The Mizbeach that was in the Mishkan is a movable utensil, right? It was made out of wood, covered with copper, and it was hollow, and they used to fill it up with dirt when they got to their location, and that was how it was connected to the ground. But it was essentially a movable utensil, as was the small Mizbeach that is in the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, if you're going to compare utensils to utensils, right? You compare the outer Mizbeach during the times of the Mishkan to the inner Mizbeach, and we said just as the height was double the width as in the inner Mizbeach, 2 amos tall, 1 amma width, so too the outer Mizbeach was 5 amos by 5 amos with a height of 10 amos. So rather than to compare the outer Mizbeach in the Mishkan to the outer Mizbeach of the Beis HaMikdash, which was a fixed stone structure, so therefore, that's your discussion. What is very interesting, and the Gemara does not mention, is that it's a weird gzera shava, because ravua, if you're going to compare the Mizbeach on the outside to the Mizbeach on the inside of the Mishkan, that's fine. But to compare the Mizbeach on the outside of the Mishkan to the Mizbeach of the third Beis HaMikdash requires you to make a gzera shava to Navi, because it's in Yechezkel. And that's usually not the way Gzera Shavas work. Gzera Shavas are within the Chamishe Chumshei Torah. To have a Gzera Shava over to Yechezkel is kind of interesting. And it seems as though what we're hinting at is that Yechezkel intentionally set up such a Gzera Shava in order to give us that hint. Before Yechezkel was around, they didn't, there was the Torah says 5, and we just wouldn't have known otherwise. So that's interesting. Amar Rav says, Moder Rabbi Yehuda bedamim, that Rabbi Yehuda, we had mentioned that Rabbi Yehuda agrees that you have to be able to put the blood, right, has to be done on a Mizbeach. It can't be done on the floor, where we said by the Ketores, Rabbi Yehuda had suggested that you could do the Ketores on the floor in the location of the Mizbeach if the Mizbeach was not available. So Rabbi Yehuda agrees, though, that you can't do that with blood sacrifices. You need a Mizbeach, Titania. As we're in our Bryce, Rabbi Yehuda says, Kos echad hayu memale midam hataruvos. When it was with the old story that we have heard a couple of times already, it was Pesach, and they were sacrificing all of these Pesach offerings, and they plugged up the drain. They had this large amount of blood on the ground. Says Rabbi Yehuda, you know what you should do is you should scoop down and grab a cup of that blood, v'shofchu al gabe mizbeach, and then throw that blood onto the mizbeach, which is going to cover you in case. Because she'im yishafech damo shel achas mehen, shemishpoch yishafech, the vowelization, sorry about that, but im yishafech, that is correct. Im yishafech damo shel achas mehen, that if the blood would spill from one of the korbanos, as we discussed, obviously it wouldn't spill right out onto the floor, because then it wouldn't have been accepted into a kli, which is required. But if it was caught into a kli and then a coin tripped and they dropped it or something like that, and now the blood never made it to the mizbeach, and somebody's korban pesach is not valid and they don't know. So what you should do is nimtza zemach shiro. This scoop of blood is going to take care of it. It's a mixture of all the bloods of thousands of korbanos, and this one this cup of blood is going to take care of every offering that was offered in the Beis Hamikdash, and that's going to be amazing. Now,
what's all the other blood doing on the floor?
Well, we didn't have to worry about it because we had learned that according to Rabbi Yehuda, that since it's min b'mino, it's not batal. It's not going to be nullified. So we're okay.
The point is, like, why one guy spilled his blood on the floor, not everyone?
Well, because all that other blood is the dam that comes from the neck of the animal after you caught it, right? Some
of it inevitably spills.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
After you slaughter it, when the blood drips out or whatever.
Okay.
So there's a lot of blood in a cow, right? Seems to be much less blood in birds, as we say. So now, if Rabbi Yehuda was holding that the floor was an appropriate place to do korbanos, and you could just throw the blood onto the floor, ha'is avidale mitzvah. So why would you have to scoop it up again? The blood got spilled on the floor. You're done. So the answer is v'dilma mishum dekasavar shvicha mikoch adam ba'inon. The answer is because dropping is not the same thing as throwing. You dropped it, that's not the same thing. So imkain nishkale v'nishbach le aduchte. So simple solution, just pick it up and drop it on the floor again, right? You don't have to go to the mizbeach. The answer is because the best way. I mean, if you're scooping blood up, obviously everybody agrees it's best to get to the mizbeach. Okay, so it doesn't prove anything really that Rabbi Yehuda agrees that the floor is not an acceptable place. Amar Rabbi Elazar, although he does hold that way, right? We know that that's the way that he holds, but not bedamim. Rava says that, but that's not a proof from here. Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Mizbeach shenifkam in ochlin begino shari mincha. Right? If you've got we said that if the Mizbeach is broken, so then it prevents you from all of the korbanos that you've shechted are all puzzle, maybe even the ones that are still alive are puzzle, right?
What if they were broke after you put the korban on top?
Well, once you've sprinkled the blood, you're done, right? Remember, sprinkling was the conclusion of the korban. So once you've sprinkled the blood on the mizbeach that's intact, you're good, right? It's only if you haven't sprinkled yet, so that's going to puzzle the offering. Now, in these the leftover mincha, so also if once the mizbeach is no good, you can't eat right from the leftover parts of the mincha. Shenemar, because the pasuk says, and the whole pasuk is kichu es mincha hanoseres mishe Hashem. Take the leftover from the mincha after you've done the kmitza from that which is burnt to Hashem. Veichlu hamatzos eitzal hamizbeach, and you can eat it as matzos by the mizbeach. Now, they didn't eat it by the mizbeach, right? It says doesn't have to be, right? It can be eaten anywhere in the azara. You don't have to the kohen doesn't have to be leaning against the mizbeach to eat this matzah. Ella bismanshu sholem v'lo bismanshu chaser. The answer is because of the mizbeach, you can eat the mincha, which means that if the mizbeach is intact, you can eat it. If not, the mizbeach is not intact, then you can't eat it. Ashkechan sheri mincha. Fine. That's a source that we understand that the leftover of the mincha cannot be eaten without a valid mizbeach intact. What about the kodshei kodshim? Right? Where's the source that you're not allowed to eat kodshei kodshim in the azara while the mizbeach is not intact? That we said that, but what's the source for it? So Amar Rabbi says Asam Midrasha de Rabbi Yossi. We have the teaching of Rabbi Yossi. He says, D'Tanya Winter Bryce. Rabbi Yossi says, Gimel Dvarim Mishum Gimel Zikanim. There were three things said by three sages, and one was said by each of three sages. And V'zeh Echad Mehen. One of them is this one, right? I don't know. He doesn't quote the other two that are here, but the one that we are concerned about is this one. Rabbi Yishmael says, Yochol ya'ale odom maser sheni liyushalayim v'yochlenu bizman hazeh. You might think, nowadays, you'd still have an obligation. Take maser sheni, go to Yerushalayim and eat it. V'dinu. I mean, it makes some sense because there's a logic. Bechor ton havas makom, umaser ton havas makom. The bechor has to be brought to bring it to Yerushalayim, and Ma'aser Sheni also has to be brought to Yerushalayim, and so therefore, Ma Bechor Eino Ella Bifnei Habayis. So the Bechor, it's a korban, so it only applies when there's a Beis Hamikdash. So you're only going to bring it to the Yerushalayim when there's a Beis Hamikdash. Af Ma'aser Eino Ella Bifnei Habayis. So therefore, Ma'aser Sheni, there's no obligation to bring it to Yerushalayim when there's no Beis Hamikdash. Okay, yeah, but Ma'ale Bechor Shekain Ton Matan Damim Ve'Murim L'Gam Mizbeach. Of course, Bechor is different. It's a korban. So Bechor, you need a Beis Hamikdash because you need a Mizbeach, right? You need to be able to pour blood on this Beach. So the answer is Bikurim Yochichu. Well, we'll show you Bikurim. Bikurim also are only applicable during the times of the Beis Hamikdash. They're not applicable outside the times of the Beis Hamikdash. Yeah, but Ma'ali Bikurim Shekem Tunan Hanacha. Bikurim still need to be placed. You hand them to the Kohen, and they get placed by the Mizbeach. So you still need a Beis Hamikdash. There's still a Beis Hamikdash involved. Ma'aser Sheni doesn't have anything to do with the Beis Hamikdash. Talmud Lomar, therefore you're right. The pasuk says, "Vehevesem shama oloseichem," that you're supposed to bring there, and the whole pasuk is you bring there your olos, where to Yerushalayim, ve'zivchechem and your other korbanos, ve'es masroseichem and your tithes, ve'es trumas yedchem and the truma of your hand, v'nidrechem v'nidvosechem and all of your pledges, ubechoros bekarchem v'tzonchem and the firstborns. So this pasuk is makish masel lebechor. This pasuk is making a connection between all these items and saying Meiser, the rules of the tithe, the second tithe that gets eaten in Yerushalayim, has the same rules as a firstborn. Ma bechor eino el b'fnei habayis, just like a firstborn animal, as since it's a korban, needs to have a Beis Hamikdash for you to bring it. Af Meiser, also same thing with Meiser Sheni. Eino ela b'fnei habayis. You're only going to bring it when you've got a Beis Hamikdash around. Okay, that's what Rabbi Yishmael says. Now we're going to try to work with this drasha. So Gemara says, "V'nedar dina v'neise b'me'atzad." Okay, so now why don't we? We said that the bechor is going to prove that that why don't we go back and say that the bechor doesn't need hanacha? We said bikurim. We tried to learn it. We tried to learn that Ma'aser Sheni doesn't need to be brought to Yerushalayim. Why do we need the pasuk? We said we can learn it from Bechor. We can't learn it from Bechor because it's a korban. Well, we'll learn it from Bikurim. We can't learn it from Bikurim because you don't have to put it down because you have to lean it against the mizbeach. So fine, we have the old Chazar Hadin. It can't be because of leaning because the Bechor also isn't brought, right? So therefore, the Bechor doesn't need to be leaned against the mizbeach. So the reason why you have to go to Yerushalayim isn't to lean it on the mizbeach. So why don't you go back to the Bechor? You should take a look at these two items. You've got Bechor, you've got Bikurim. It's not because it's a korban, because Bikurim is not a korban. It's not because you have to lean it against the Mizbeach, because Bechor, you don't have to lean against the Mizbeach. What is the connector? That these two things need to be eaten in Yerushalayim. So to Ma'aser Sheni needs to be eaten in Yerushalayim, despite the fact, and only when there's a Beis Hamikdash. So the answer is Mishum Dekel Meifrach. The answer is you can't compare Ma'aser Sheni to these two items because both a korban and the bikurim both have to do with the mizbeach. Right? At the end of the day, whether you're burning it and throwing its blood on the mizbeach like a offering, or you're just taking the fruits and you're leaning against the mizbeach, you need a mizbeach. You don't have one. Therefore, it's not similar to Ma'aser Sheni. Therefore, we need that pasuk to tell me that it is similar. Okay. Now, my kasaf.
So maybe you could still bring it.
We would have thought you could still bring it, therefore the pasuk has to come out and tell me because of that. Because now the pasuk tells me, no, it's just like Bikurim, it's just like Bechor, and you don't have to bring it to Yerushalayim when there's no Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so now my kasaver, what is Rabbi Yishmael saying? Ikasaver kedusha rishona kedusha lishata. Is Yerushalayim a holy place, or is it not a holy place now?
It's holy.
Well, good answer. Yeah. So Yehuda's going to throw his hat right in the ring there.
Yeah. This is a good one. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the question: is there holiness, right? What's going on when they established the kedusha during the times of Yoshua, presumably, right? But the kedusha rishona, was it temporary? and then when we left, or when we were exiled, the kedusha left, or when Yeshua came in, they sanctified it. Now it's sanctified permanently. So therefore, ikasavar kedusha rishona kidsha l'shata kidsha l'asid lavo. Maybe what you're holding is that when they established the original kedusha, it was for that time and forever. Okay, so then afilu b'chor nami. So then, what do you need a Beis Hamikdash for the b'chor? All you need is a mizbeach. Right? You don't need a Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so right, the kedusha. The only reason why we were saying you need a Beis Hamikdash because you need kedusha. You need to sanctify it again. If you don't need to sanctify it again, you don't need a Beis Hamikdash. Right? Just put up a mizbeach and you're good to go. So ika savar lo kidsha l'ased lavo. If you're going to say that there isn't really kedusha, so that afilu bechor nami tiboy, then he should have asked the question, right? He should have been asked the question. One second. Ika savar lo kidsha lavo. Right? He should have also been asking the question. I'm stop become bechor. I'm confused. One second. He would. So he's asked the question. That he should ask also on the bechor. And this is a circumstance where the bechor was. There's always these crazy circumstances. The bechor was brought when there was a mizbeach. They sprinkled the blood on the mizbeach, and then the Beis Hamikdash got destroyed. Now you're sitting here with your bechor meat. Can you eat it or not? You should have asked that question. Why? Because the bechor has to be eaten in Yerushalayim. And if when the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, there's no holiness in Yerushalayim, forget worrying about whether you can bring Meiser Sheni, worry about whether you can eat the bechor without...
But weren't you traveling with the Mishkan in the desert before you got to Israel?
This is not the Mishkan, right? This is the Beis Hamikdash, right? We're talking about during the Beis Hamikdash times. Right? So... Amar Ravina, so Ravina says the Yolam Kasavar Lo Kidsha. There's no kedusha to it. So what's going on here? Bebechor shenizrak damo kodem korban abayis vecharav abayis v'adayin bisaro kayim. So he says what we're dealing with here is the blood of the bechor was thrown before the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Then the Beis Hamikdash gets destroyed, and now you've got the meat. And you're thinking to yourself, I'm a little bit sad the Beis Hamikdash just got destroyed, but I'm hungry. So now, what are you going to do? Okay, so the itkish bisaro ledamo. So the itkish, so therefore the Torah tells us that there's a connection between the blood and the meat. Right? Pasuk says, es damam tizrok al mizbech ubisaram yiyalach. When you throw the blood on the mizbech, then you can eat the meat. Well, the pasuk is connecting the blood to the meat, right? Ma damo b'mizbeach, af b'saro b'mizbeach. Just like you need a mizbeach in order to throw the blood, the mizbeach still has to be present in order to eat the korban as well. So therefore, right, now comes the question, Meiser has nothing to do with blood. So therefore, if there's kedusha, if there's no kedusha, right? So I understand that I can't eat the bechor, but maybe I still have to bring Meiser Sheni. So therefore, I would know, I'll see Meiser V'yolef mi bechor. Now it tells me that I can learn from Meiser to bechor, that just like I can't bring the bechor, I don't bring Meiser as well. Okay, good. V'chi davar halamed behekesh chozer umelamed behekesh. Old problem, right? Problem is that you've got a hekesh that you're going to tell me that meat comes from blood, and then you're going to tell me that the Meiser Sheni comes from the meat. So I've got a hekesh to a hekesh, and then that can't do that. So the answer is Meiser Dagan Chulin. The answer is Meiser is not hekesh. Meiser Sheni is Chulin, right? This is a big issue, right? Whether Meiser Sheni, the second tithe that I have to eat in Yerushalayim, does not have the status of holy items, of a holy item. So therefore, to consider my own money, it's Chulin, right? As far as this is concerned, big issue of concern and conversation, which we'll see in other places. So therefore, if he holds this opinion that is going to hold that it's chulin, it's an individual's mind. It makes a difference. Like for example, whether you can marry a woman with Meiser Sheni, you go to Yerushalayim and offer a woman dinner of Meiser Sheni, right? Theoretically, you can get married with it, right? So therefore you can learn the Hekesh. Because Hekesh to Hekesh is only a problem when both Hekeshim
I can't marry a woman with hektish.
Right.
You cannot.
Cannot. Right? Because then
Try though.
it's not yours. Right? Can you do it with the meat from a shlomim? Is that already not me'ilah? So potentially, yeah. So the answer is...
So there's no kedushin with hektish.
I believe that's the case, yes, because it's not yours entirely. So I'm recalling that from years ago, so I'm hoping I'm correct. So if somebody is going to send me a text message after watching the video and saying, no, not true, Rabbi Loiterman, I will accept that. I'm pretty sure that's true.
That probably come from your father eventually.
That's why we have fathers. Make sure we don't make mistakes like that. So fine. That's great according to the opinion that says that we're going to, what is the original source, right? Whether we're going to take a look at the item that is being learned, right? The final destination. Because remember, we had Hekesh to Hekesh before, where the first item on the Hekesh list was not Hektish, right? And then we went from there to there and we said, okay, fine. But now this the last item, right? The Meiser Sheni, which is the ultimate destination of the Hektish, that one is not Hektish. So if you say that the last one is not Hektish, therefore the Hekesh to Hekesh works, great. But Elaman Damar Basar Melamed Azlinon, what about if you say that it goes by the item that's teaching? Well, the first item that's teaching is blood. The second item that's teaching is the meat of a korban. That's both Hektish. It's only the third item on the list that's not. So Michael, remember what are you going to say? The answer is Damu Basar Chadam Ilsahi. The answer is the first one's not really Hekesh. Meat and blood is part of the same korban. It's the same item. You're really learning Meiser Sheni from the meat and blood of Shlomim. That's what you're doing. It's not a Hekesh from blood to meat and then meat to Meiser Sheni. Right? You buying it? You look skeptical. So you buying that? Okay, good. Okay.
There's no such thing as hektish after this man of the base of Mikdash, correct?
You could make something hektish, right? You could get stuck with it.
I can make something hektish right now?
Yes. And then you got to all hang on to it. And then don't.
So and there's Me'ilah.
And you could commit Me'ilah.
Me'ilah nowadays?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, you could mess yourself up with that, right?
That'd be a good prank. Hey, here's my phone. It's not hektish.
Remember, do not do it to your wife.
Okay. Ki Solik Ravin. When Ravin went to Eretz Yisrael, Amr l'shmeita kami Rabbi Yirmiyah. He said this before Rabbi Yirmiyah. And Amar, he said, Bavloi tipshay, those foolish Babylonians. We've heard this before. Foolish Babylonians. Im tul diyoseh be'arach hashocha amri shamata de mechashcha. It's because they live in such a land that's so dark. That's why they say dark things. Right? What is it so dark about Bavel? It could be that it's dark because we say Arad Yisrael Machim. It's enlightening the land. The Eretz Yisrael gives a light of intellect, and Bavel didn't have that. And maybe that's what he's referring to by calling it so dark. Rashi says because it was in a valley, right? Bavel is a low spot, so therefore it's always in the shade. Okay, so therefore. Lo shmiya lahu ha detanya, did they not hear that which we learned in a brisa? Bishas siluk masos. We learned that at the time that they would take the Mishkan down, here's the rule. When they would take the Mishkan down, kodshim nifsalin, then all of the kodshim would become puzzle. Right? Because now it's like, remember when we were like, it's so weird that you have a destructive base of Mikdash. They used to destroy the Mishkan all the time. The cloud would start moving, time to take it down. What happened to all the people who had korbanos, right? So now everybody's got somebody brought a korban, they go home to eat it. The cloud's moving, they take the Mishkan down. As soon as they took the Mishkan down, then my korban is puzzle. Can't eat it. Okay? And no more eating meat. And then furthermore, right, even though the Mishkan is taken down, and you no longer have the distinct camps of the Machane Shechina, which was in the middle, the Machane Levia that was around it, the Machane Yisrael that's around that, right? You still have to worry about the camps having levels of Kedusha, and the Zar is not allowed into the camp of the Shechina and the Levia. The Metzora is not allowed in any of the three camps, so therefore what happens to be is those people have to move out of their respective camps and travel along the outside of Bnei Yisrael. They can't move back into their homes while they're traveling because they have to be on the outside, despite the fact that there's no Mishkan. So therefore, the kedusha of the camps is intact.
Doesn't the Zav can't stay in the third camp?
The Zav can stay in the third camp. Yes,
has to leave.
But but Mitzvah has to leave all the camps. Right. That's why they didn't travel when Miriam got Tzaras, right? Because they were waiting for her because she was outside all the camps. So therefore, they waited for her Tzaras to heal before they traveled again.
She could have just traveled outside.
She would have had to be outside of everybody, right? Like, instead of respect.
She would have had to quarantine herself.
Yes. V'tanya idach. Now we have another brisa. The other brisa says, "B'shnei mekomos kodshim necholin." There are two circumstances where you're allowed to eat the kodshim, where you're allowed to eat kodshim. And that is, we presume, it means that when the Mishkan is standing, right, then of course you're allowed to eat kodshim. And the second is that you can eat it when they trap, where you can eat it, and then in that circumstance you can only eat it within the curtains of the Azara. And then the second, when they took the Azara down, then you could eat it anywhere in the camps, through the entire thing. So therefore, that's a steer, that's a contradiction in this brisa, because this brisa seems to imply that the kedusha of the camps isn't a thing anymore. Once you take the curtains of the Mishkan down, now the whole camp is an acceptable place. Now the whole camp is the Azara, and you can eat your meat anywhere. So my lav, aren't we suggesting ha b'kodshei kodshim, ha b'kodshei kalim? It depends which ones you're talking about, right? Kodshei kodshim have to be eaten in the Azara. When you take the curtains down, there's no more. Then now there's no place you can't eat it anymore, right? But kodshei kalim, right? They can be eaten when there's no mizbeach around. Why? Because kodshei kalim are able to eat in all of the camps, right? Even then in the Machane Yisrael. So therefore, even when that gets taken down, you can still eat it, even though you're traveling, which means there's no mizbeach. That is a question on Abaye, because Abaye said, even kodshei kalim, you can only eat bechor when there's a mizbeach, right?
After the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed.
Right, when there's no mizbeach, correct. So this seems to contradict it. Okay, so Amar Ravina. So Ravina is going to explain Abaye's perspective, right? That can't question. He's going to explain Rabbi Yirmiyah's question on Abaye. He says like this: Amar Ravina, Idi ve'idi b'kodshim kalim. No, both of these brisos are talking about kodshei kalim. There's a circumstance where you can eat it, and a circumstance where you can't eat it, and it goes like this.
Well, that's the shortest daf I've ever seen.
That's right. There we go.
Oh man.
Wow.
I know, we love these bonuses. It's the bonus page.
I thought we had a shorty.
So, ha Rabbi Yishmael, ha Rabbanan. The answer is the brisa. The first brisa is Rabbi Yishmael, that we said that Rabbi Yishmael says that by Bechor, which is kodshei kalim, he says basar v'dam, you're not allowed to eat it when there's no Beis Hamikdash, right? And so therefore, that's the rule. And the other is the second brisa is the Rabbanan, who disagree with Rabbi Yishmael's opinion. And they hold that a Bechor, right, is not connected to Basaro L'Damo. Therefore, even though the blood can't, when there's no Mizbeach, you can't throw the blood, you can still eat the meat. And so therefore, there's an alternate opinion. That's the explanation of two brises. One says they could eat the meat when the Mishkan was taken down, and one said you couldn't. Ve'ibais ema, or else I'll give you another potential answer. And therefore, of course, that would wind up being that Abaye would be like the Shita that holds that you can't eat it. Ve'ibais ema, ha ve'ha bekodshei kodshim, that both the brisos are talking about the holy meats, the kodshei kodshim, which have to be eaten inside of the Azara. Okay, so umay b'shnei mekomos. But when we said the two times, we assumed that two times meant when the Mishkan is standing and when the Mishkan is taken down. Not so. We're talking about when the Mishkan is being put up and when the Mishkan is being taken down. Kodem shi'amdu leviim es hamishkan le'achar shi'yifarku haleviim es hamishkan. We're talking about before the Mishkan was put up and afterwards. Meaning, when the Mishkan and the Mizbeach, they were kodem sheyamdu leviim es hamishkan, means when the Mishkan and the Mizbeach were placed in their right place, right, and then they put up the curtains. First step was You start from the, I guess they would build it from the inside out. So they put up the Mishkan, they would put up the Mizbeach, and then they'd put up the curtains. Well, the curtains weren't up yet, but the Mizbeach is in place. And so therefore, you can eat it. But the other one is Le'achar sheyifarko aviyim es Mishkan. When they're taking the stuff down, they're taking the Mishkan down and the curtains are coming down. So therefore, no, I have it backwards. 1 second, I have it backwards. Before you put it up, right, before you put it up, right, before you put it, basically like this. Before you put it, you put the Mishkan down and you put the Mizbeach down. Before the Azara goes up, the Mizbeach is not considered to be established. Then you can't eat it. However, when they were taking it down, the Mishkan and the Mizbeach are established and they're in place. So even though you take the curtains down, the meat could still be eaten despite the fact that they haven't moved it yet, which means that according to all opinions, you need the Mizbeach. It's just a question is, at what point is the Mizbeach now non-functional, right? So when you're setting it up, it's non-functional until everything is in place. When you're taking it down, it's functional until the Mizbeach actually gets removed. I think that's what it's saying here, right? So Rashi says, we can read this lengthy-ish Rashi here for a second on Samach Alfi, who explains it. We're not talking about after they traveled when the Mizbeach is already moving. One is talking about when the Mishkan is still established in its place. One is after they've removed all of the kroshim and all of the curtains, all of the beams for the Mishkan. The Adayin Mizbeach b'mkomo, and the Mizbeach is still in place. The Kodem she'amdu leviim as hamishkan denokat hacha lav dafka nakat. This, he said, before they put it up, is not what it means. Well, then it continues on, right? But the point is that it's the setting up versus the taking down. Okay, fine. Ma'udetema, because what would be the reason why you would think if the Mizbeach is still there and you've taken the curtains down, of course it's still able to be eaten. Why would you think you can't? The answer is because you might think if soluhu biyotze. Remember, you're not allowed to take sacrificial. Sacrificial meats has to be eaten in the Azara. You take the curtains down surrounding the Mishkan, and now you're like outside the Azara. Well, if you took the meat outside the Azara, wouldn't that invalidate your meat? So the answer is, Kamash Malan, that no. The Bryce is telling us that once you take the curtains down, it just expands the zone. And you're okay until the Mizbeach starts to move. Okay, Ve'imahachinami, why don't you say, that makes good sense. Why don't you say you're right? Once you take the curtains down, it should be possible because of going out. So the answer is, Amar Kar, there's a pasuk that tells me that's not true. Pasuk says, V'nasa oel moed, the oel moed travels. Afa pishen nasa, even though the Ohel Moed is in traveling mode, Ohel Moed hu, it is considered the Ohel Moed. And that sense that the whole area is still considered the Azara of the Ohel Moed, despite the fact that the Mishkan is disassembled and in traveling. So therefore, that's what it is. Okay, so now, nevertheless, you can only eat it while the Mizbeach is in place. So therefore, if that's when they're putting it up, it isn't in place yet, so therefore that's why you can't eat it when you're putting it up. Next, Amar Avuna, Amar Rav.
So if it's traveling, why can't you eat it while you're traveling?
Because once the Mizbeach is uprooted from its place, then you have a problem because there's no Mizbeach.
Oh. So in that little time zone,
when the Mishkan, when you take the curtains down and the Mizbeach is still there,
that's when you use.
That's when you. That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, but you need both. Okay.
That's correct. That's at least as I'm understanding it. Right. Again, someone at home interactive. You can always text me and say you disagree with my understanding. That's how I'm understanding
maybe you could say, oh, maybe you just need a mizbeach nowadays, right?
Only if Kiddush, only if then you're right. Only if you hold that the Kedusha Rishona is Kiddush Lavo.
Why can't you say
which the Rambam holds?
I thought Kedusha Rishona is not there, but the Kedusha Shnia is forever. Wasn't that it?
That's We will discuss all of these different versions at various points, but yes. And the Rambam holds that the Kedusha that they established is intact, and the Kedusha still exists. And therefore, the only reason we don't bring korbanos is because we don't know exactly the makom of the mizbeach. If we knew where the place to do the mizbeach, where to put the mizbeach was, then we could do korbanos. Bring korban pesach, right? Because we would say we're tamei. It doesn't matter if it's korban pesach. Right. Your tumah would be duchuy b'tzibur, and you'd be able to bring it. So korban pesach specifically is the easiest one.
Couldn't you make you have to have a mizbeach that's
exactly in the right place.
Yeah, but they made different size mizbeach. Moshe's was different than
correct.
Shlomo's.
But you got to know
a big one that is all three shitas.
But wherever you're right,
covers the whole area.
So yeah, you gotta find exactly. No. Apparently, that's the issue is that we don't know exactly what mizbeach is. Right. Others, if you don't hold that kedusha rishon is kitchel shasa, then theoretically there would be no problem of going on harbayis nowadays.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Sure.
So that's why we are makbid not to, and it's considered holy. Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Rav Huna says in Rav, Mizbeach shel Shiloh shel Avanim Haya. When they moved when Bnei Israel got into Eretz Yisrael for the first 14 years, right? They had established. They put the Mishkan in what was the name of the city? Givonim, right? What was it?
Wasn't it Gilgal?
Gilgal, that's right. Thank you. I knew it was a Gilgal. And it was there, and they basically ran it as the regular Mishkan. Then they moved it over to Shiloh, where it lasted for 360. Thank you. There you go. 369 years. Thank you, Article. 369. I had to remember all these things. 369 years. And during that time, they made a Mizbeach of stone. So they didn't use the Mizbeach that they had in the Mishkan at that time. Ditan is going to Brisa. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said, "Ma Talmud Lomar." Why does it say Avanim, Avanim, Avanim 3 times? Why does it say the stone Mizbeach 3 times in the different psukim? First one is in Shmos. Parakaf Pasuk Beis. V'mizbach Avanim taseli. If you're going to make a stone, one, right? Lo tivnasem gozis. Right? Don't make it out of hewn stone. Then it says,
what does it mean, stone?
Hewn means that they carve it, right? You're not supposed to carve the Mizbeach in order to create it, right? You can't chop pieces off of it in order to create the Mizbeach. V'haya be'avrachem as a Yarden says, when you cross the Jordan, u'banisa sham Mizbeach la'Hashem, and you build a Mizbeach there, lokecha, Mizbeach avonim, lo tanif lem barzal. Then it says that it's a stone altar, don't use metal when you make it. That was number 2. Then it also says avonim shlemos tivnas mizbeachim. You need to use complete stones. Can't have broken stones, and that is plus number 3. It's 3 times. What are the 3 stone mizbechos? Echad shel Shiloh, v'echad shel Nov v'Givon. Then after Shiloh was done, they moved the Mishkan over to Nov and Givon. The Nov was the city of Kohanim, and Givon, and then finally Beis Olam, and finally to the permanent location of the Beis HaMikdash. And those were all stone mizbechos.
Doesn't the Torah say you have to make it out of? You make a hollow and you fill it with dirt.
The Mishkan one.
Yeah.
That's the Chiddush here is they didn't use that one anymore, right? Okay. Meisiv Rav Acha Bar Ami, Rav Acha Bar Ami says, wait a second. Eish Yardim in a Shemayim, it says, the fire that came out of Shemayim, Bimei Moshe, during Moshe's time when they inaugurated the Mishkan, Lo Nistalka Me'al Mizbeach Nechoshes. It didn't go out, El Bimei Shlomo, all the way until Shlomo's time. That fire lasted for, what was it, 400 years, right? All the way until Shlomo Melch's time. Ve'eish Yardim in Shlomo, then they built a new Mizbeach, and a fire came out of the sky and lit the Mizbeach and Bayis Rishon, and that one stayed on until Menashe, King Menashe, came hundreds of years later, and he put it out, right? Because he wanted to do Avodah Zarah, because he was a bad king, and he put out the fire on the Mizbeach.
But putting out a heavenly fire can be a big sin.
Yeah, he was not a good. So was Avodah Zarah, right? He was as bad a guy.
So putting out a fire from a Mizbeach is called Avodah Zarah?
No, he also did Avodah Zarah. He didn't want to see people worshiping Hashem.
What was his punishment for putting out the fire?
I don't know what his punishment specifically for putting out the fire was, right? But we know, right? Losa say that's probably as I said, he was worshiping Avodah Zarah and got everybody else to worship Avodah Zarah. It probably wasn't his worst Avera. Ve'im Isa. Now, if it's true that they weren't using the Mizbeach of Nechoshes anymore, Meikara who historically, then the fire was already out. right? They only used the Mishkan for 40 years in the desert, then 14 years in Gilgal. So what do you mean it lasted all the way till Shlomo Melech's time, right? How are you going to explain the Brisa? So the answer is, Hu Amar Rabbi Nosson Tanya. He holds like Rabbi Nosson. It's a machlokas, which one they use, because Rabbi Nosson says, Rabbi Nosson Omer, Mizbech Shel Shiloh Shonechoshes Haya, right? The one that they used in Shiloh was the Mizbeach that they used in the desert. Chalul Umali Avanim. It was hollowed and they filled it with rocks, which made it more permanent. That's what it meant, that they used a stone Mizbeach. Rather than filled it with sand or dirt, they filled it with rocks. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, My lo nistalka. What does it mean that it didn't go out? Lo nistalka levatola. They didn't nullify the Mizbeach of Nechoshes completely. They built a new one, but they still had the old fire around. So Maihi, so what does that mean? How do you not nullify the old one and still use a new one? So Rabbanan Amri, the Rabbanan said, Shaviva Haya Mishadra. What would happen is that they had set up the Nechoshes one, and sparks of fire would shoot out from the copper one onto the new stone one that they made and keep that fire going. Right? Now, I'm not sure exactly how often that would happen, whether that was a one-time thing, that's how the fire got lit, and it jumped over to the new Mizbeach, or whether that was continuously happening.
I think you just say they transferred the fire from one to another.
Well, it sounds like it was jumping. Shviva Haya Mishadra.
But why can't the Gemara just say
they lit it from the other place?
A fire from there, and they put on the new one.
Because they want to say the fire stayed lit.
It is lit.
And then they
transferred it.
It's not the same. If a person is doing it, they want nobody doing anything to light a new fire, right? They want that fire continuous. Okay. Rav Papa says, "Ushpiza havanakat." The fire would travel, right? It would go around. It zimnin hacha v'zimnin hacha. Sometimes it would be on this mizbech, sometimes on that mizbech. The fire would move around. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting.
Live with faith.
It's a leap of fire.
That's a good one.
Okay. Tanan Hasam. We learned in a Mishnah in Maseches Midos that Kishalu Bnei Hagola, when the people came in the times of the Beis Hamikdash Sheni, the second Beis Hamikdash, Hosifu of Arba Amos min Hadorim v'Arba Amos min Hamarav. They added on to the Mizbeach an extra 4 amos by 4 amos on each side. So in other words, during the first Beis Hamikdash, it was 28 by 28. Let's back in our nice new ones.
Yeah,
why am I using? I'm going with the cheap ones.
Maybe they did that because they didn't know where it was supposed to be.
Now that's a nice blue.
All right, hold that thought. 28 by 28. Okay. And then they came along with a new color and they added on 4 more this way and 4 more that way, so that the total is now 32 in all directions.
Right.
Okay, so that's how they increased the size of their mizbeach. Okay, so now,
Isn't this is the north?
yeah. Well, the question is, which side did they add it on to?
Oh, I thought you said
Right? They said arba almost min adorim, arba almost min. You're right.
It's all right. You don't have to change it.
It's fine. They added on from the south side and the west side, which is Kimin Gamma, which is the old Gamma letter, which we said was that shape. Okay. My taima, why did they do that? Amar Rav Yosef Mishum de lo sapek. The answer is because they wanted to have more space. Right? They wanted to put more space on the Mizbeach in the second Beis Hamikdash. So, Amar le Abaye says, Hashta Mikdash Rishon Dichsiv Bey. 1 second. You're telling me the first Beis Hamikdash, it says, Yehuda v'Yisrael Rabim Kahal Yereim al Hayam. They had so many Jewish people during that first Beis Hamikdash era. It was like the Jewish people were like the sand of the sea. Sapek, there was enough room on a Mizbeach that was 28 amos. But Migdash Sheni, the second Beis Hamikdash, Dichsiv Bey, that it says, Kol Akal, the entire people that returned. Everyone was so satisfied they were living in Bavel. Not everybody came back, right? Some of us are still living here. Yeah. So, that's the same thing. Kol Akal Ke'echad Arba Ribo. The entire thing with the entire people is 41,000 people. That was it. That was the whole nation that came back. Lo Sapek, but the Mizbeach isn't big enough. That doesn't make sense. So Amar Le, so he says, Hasam Eish Shel Shemayim Siaton. The answer is, in the first Beis Hamikdash, they had a heavenly fire. Heavenly fires are much hotter, and therefore burned the korbanos way faster.
It's more harder than volcano.
I don't know. I cannot compare to a volcano, but I can compare from the first Beis Hamikdash to the second Beis Hamikdash. It is much hotter than the second Beis Hamikdash. Hacha, but here, Ein Eish Shel Shemayim Siaton. The second Beis Hamikdash, they didn't have the heavenly fire. There was a regular fire. Therefore, they need a bigger mizbeach for fewer korbanos because it took longer to burn them. Kiyosa Rabin, when Rabin came from Eretz Yisrael, he said, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, he said the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Mishum Bar Kapara, in the name of Bar Kapara. Shisin Hosifu. They not only that, what they added on, since they were adding on the west side and the south side, they added on the pipe works that they added in. So what happened is, we got some nice colors here. Uh-oh. I don't know how I lost the cup for that one. Okay. They added on some, that's yellow's not a great color, right? I should pick a darker color. Okay. Pink. Okay, that's good. The shisen, they added these pipes here. The keren is here. This is the corners, right? So they added onto here, in the corners here, they added pipes. Used to be that when they wanted to pour the wine and the water on the mizbeach, they would pour it on the corner, it would run off the side into a drain that was next to the mizbeach. When they expanded over the drain that was over there, and then they made a pipe which went through so that you'd pour it into the corner, the hole. There was actually a basin up on the corner, and they poured into that basin, and it would flow. And did they show it here? Not really. Can't really see it on this picture. But they would flow. It would flow all the way down in a pipe, all the way through underneath. Okay, so that they added in during the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. That's why, right? That's why they added on. So now,
I thought you couldn't have these holes under the mizbeach.
well, so they couldn't make caves and things, but I guess that's just a channel, right? Is built into it. Meikara, so at first they thought mizbach adama shu otum ba'adama. Right, means that that it has to be a stone ground mizbeach of the ground. Maybe the Torah means that you're supposed to make it that it's sealed in dirt, right? No holes, completely solid, right? Ulavasof savar. At the end, they realized what it means. Shesia ke'achila, that the drinking of the mizbeach is like the eating, the consumption of the mizbeach, meaning that just like the consumption, the eating of the meat of the mizbeach is consumed on the top of the mizbeach. So too, right? The drinking, the liquids of pouring on the mizbeach also can be poured on the top of the mizbeach, not to pour it onto the mizbeach and drip onto the floor. Therefore, they expanded it over the whole area where the drain was, so that they can then make a pipe system onto the mizbeach. And that's what they decided. Umay mizbach adama. So then, how did they understand this phrase of mizbach adama in the second Beis Hamikdash? Then, shehu mechubar b'adama. It has to be attached to the ground. Shelo yivnenu al gabe kipim v'lo al gabe mechilos. That you can't have underneath it the caves and the what do you call it? The caverns or whatever that they were putting underneath it.
It's interesting. They thought that they were going to improve on.
It's very interesting, right? They're improving on the design, and it's going to get even more interesting. What they knew, what they didn't know, and what we say we knew, right?
They thought they were, in the
Yes.
Rishon, they were doing it incorrectly almost.
That's right. They're saying, yeah, we changed our mind. We reread the psukim, and we got a better way, right? Shlomo, David, all those people, but we know. Okay. So Amar of Yosef says, Lav Hainu Ditanya. Isn't that what it says in the Brisa, right? That the Brisa says, "Vayachinu hamizbeach al mechonosov." That in Ezra's time they established the mizbeach on its foundations, I guess, mechonosov. The pasuk says shegil esof midosav, which means that they fulfilled the full measurement, they expanded it to be the real size of what the mizbeach is supposed to be. So. That means in the first Beis Hamikdash, they didn't know, right? Or they didn't do it right. So that's the Gemara is a little bit interesting because the problem with that is, okay, fine, maybe we can understand Shlomo, who's the smartest person who ever lived, didn't understand properly somehow what the Mizbeach was supposed to be. But nevertheless, we have another problem. Hakol bichsav miyad Hashem alai hiskil. Shlomo says, where did he get all of the rules of the Beis HaMikdash from? It was a nevuah. Whatever Hashem told him, he did it exactly as it. So the whole thing is a nevuah. How does he not know? Elam Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef says, Kra Ashkach V'Darash. So what happens is that the people in the second Beis HaMikdash, they didn't have a special nevuah that told them something different, right? Or okay, so the pasuk says they found a new pasuk, right? And this is how they explained in Ezra's time. Vayomer David said, Zehu Beis Hashem Elokim v'zeh Mizbeach le'olah liYisrael. This is the house of Hashem, and this is the Mizbeach of the Olah for the Jewish people. And so they ruled from David, right? Ki bias, that the Mizbeach is like the Beis HaMikdash. Ma bias shishim amma, just like the Beis HaMikdash has 60 amos, af Mizbeach shishim amos. So too the Mizbeach has a capacity, ultimately can be 60 amos. So meaning, David and Shlomo knew 100% they could have built it larger. They didn't build it larger because they didn't need to. But they understood, David even was saying, we know we could build it up to 60, we're building it 28. Okay? Wow. And then comes along Ezra, and he says, oh, well, we'll add 4 on in order to be able to include the drain system and make it a little bit larger. Right. So Bishlama bias minkara tzura so. Okay, so that's going to be the next thing. So, fine. So therefore, everybody knew that it could be 60. Next piece. Bishlama bias minkara tzura so. I understand. Now, they come back, these people in Ezra's time, they come back from 70 years in exile. How do they know where to put the Mizbeach? That's our problem. We don't know where Mizbeach is. How do they know? So Bishlam Abayis, I understand how they knew where the Beis HaMikdash goes, because Min Karatzuraso, they took a look, they saw the foundation, right? There were burnt out remnants. They knew where to put the Beis HaMikdash. Ela Mizbeach Mino Yodi. How do they know where to put the Mizbeach? So Rabbi Elazar says, Ro'u Mizbeach Bonoi Umichal Hasar Hagodo Omed Umakriv Alav. They had a vision. They saw the Mizbeach, and they saw Michael, who was the great officer of Hashem, the angel, standing and offering korbanos on the Mizbeach. So therefore they had a vision, and that's how they knew. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha says, Afrosha Yitzchak Ro. They saw the ashes from Akedas Yitzchak. So they knew where it was supposed to go, right? So Shemunach Bosamokum, that's where the place was. So they figured it out. For Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani, or Shmuel Bar Nachmani says,
it's interesting because no one ever burnt Yitzchak.
Right. So he said not Yitzchak, right? The ashes. So the comment is that it was either the ram or the wood that was from the Mizbeach there. But yes. Right. So Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar, Mikol Abayis Kulo Heirechu Reach Ketoris. They went around the whole area. The whole area smelled like incense. Mm-hmm. But Misham, from that one location, Heirechu Reach Ivarim, they smelled meat. So they said, this is the place, right? The place where the meat smell is. So they knew where to put it.
This just seems like one of these Gemaras that's like deep meaning. Right?
Probably so, yeah. Yes. Right. What exactly is the main part of korbanos here or something?
What are they smelling 70 years later?
Yes.
Expired meat.
Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chana said, Rabbi Yochanan, Shlosh Neviim Alui Ma'im Minagol. There were 3 prophets, right? Chagai, Mishal, and Azariah. I'm sorry, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi were the last 3 of the Nevi'im, and they came up from Bavel. They came up from Bavel with everybody. And Echad Shehid Lahem Al Mizbeach. One of them had a nevuah and said that you have 60 amos by 60 amos to build a Mizbeach. Ve'echad Shehid Lahem Al Makom Mizbeach. The other one said, and this is the nevuah where the place of the Mizbeach was. Ve'echad Shehid Lahem Shemakrivin Af Al Pi She'ein Bias. And the other one says that the Kedusha Rishona is still present, and therefore you can even bring korbanos despite the fact that you don't have a Beis HaMikdash in the future, right? B'masni satana. Okay, so we learned in a brisa Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov and Rabbi Eliezer says, Shlosh Nevi'im, there were 3 Nevi'im, Chag, Zechar, and Malachi, Alui Mahem min Agola, they came up from Eretz Yisrael, from Bavel. Echad Shei Lem Mizbeach, one of them told them that it's 60 amos, Ve'al Makom HaMizbeach, and also where it was, meaning the first Navi told them 2 things, right? The Mizbeach, the size, and where. Ve'echad Shei Lehem Shema Krivin Al Pi She'ein Afal B'Shem Bayis. The other one said, you could still bring Korbanos, just even though there's no Beis HaMikdash, all you need a Mizbeach. And the third is, Ve'echad Shei Lehem Al Torah Shetikosef Ashuris. The third was, we're going to write the Torah in the Ashuris script, as we had learned in Masechah Sanhedrin, right, about that rule, and the Machlokas, about what that was. Whether originally the Torah was written in Ashuris and they switched over to Ksav Ivri and now they switched back. Whether that was always Ivris and then they switched it for the first time in Ashuris, or whether it was always that it was written in Ashuris and they were using Ivris for other things, right? But in any event, those some different Machlokas on that topic.
Just sounds interesting. Why would a Torah be given in Ashuris? It's from Ashur. It had nothing to do with us.
Correct. Why we call it Ivri? Why we call it Ashuris?
Yeah.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Tana Rabbanan. The rabbis doing Karen v'keves v'yesod v'ribu ma'akvin. The 3 things that you need to have, 4 things that you need to have going on in your mizbeach in order for it to be kosher is you need to have 4 horns, you need a ramp, you need a base, and you need it to be squared. And of all those things, midas arko umidas rachbo umidas kamas. The length and the height. In Makvin, that's not matter. Those don't matter. And we'll pick up from tomorrow and see what the source of those halachos are.
I thought you were going to catch us up like tonight.
I was going to go, yeah. I was going to go.